Ever wonder how a movie about innocent summer flings actually sent a cast member to the emergency room? It turns out the sunny, leather-jacketed world of Rydell High hides a surprisingly brutal production history behind all those catchy dance numbers and slicked-back hair. Let's look at the chaotic, dangerous, and downright weird facts behind Grease, the musical that defined a generation and barely survived its own creation. The leather jacket that almost went to Milwaukee. Danny Zuko struts into our hearts with the perfect mix of charm and vulnerability, but the role was originally offered to Henry Winkler. In 1977, his Arthur Fonzarelli on Happy Days was the literal face of 1950s nostalgia. When producers handed him the crown jewel of teen cool, Winkler flat out said no. Terrified of being typecast, he knew taking Danny would cement him as the leather-jacketed cool guy forever, closing the door on dramatic roles. That refusal cracked open the door for a young John Travolta, who brought something Winkler couldn't: the ability to sing and move like a seasoned, confident pro. Winkler later admitted his mistake, watching Travolta buy a private plane while he went home with a glass of orange juice. The good girls who refused the bad boy. The hunt for Sandy Olsen was even more complicated. The producers chased every rising star of the decade, almost pushing the film in completely different directions. Marie Osmond was high on the list, a no-brainer for America's sweetheart, but she walked away because she absolutely hated the ending, firmly believing Sandy transforming for a guy sent the completely wrong message to young women. George Lucas's college roommate, director Randall Kleiser, peeked at Star Wars footage to see if Carrie Fisher could work, but couldn't gauge her performance through her massive Princess Leia hair. Ultimately, Olivia Newton-John signed on because she couldn't nail an American accent. Sandy Dombrowski was quickly rewritten as an Australian transfer student to cover the vocal gap, an animated hallucination. That quirky animated opening sequence feels like a leftover from a completely different, much weirder film because it actually is. The first person to grab the film rights was Ralph Bakshi, the guy who made the infamous Fritz the Cat. Bakshi didn't make cartoons for kids. He made gritty, dark features. When co-creators Jim Jacobs and Warren Casey asked how his animated version would end, Bakshi's team dropped a bomb. Danny Zuko takes his own life. Thankfully, his rights lapsed, allowing producer Alan Carr to pay $200,000 out of his pocket to create the lighter, pop-fueled version we know today. Bakshi never let the concept go, releasing his edgy animated film. Hey, good looking years later to scratch that itch, hiding the gray hairs. Escaping an animated tragedy meant casting real humans, but Hollywood in the 70s wasn't interested in age-accurate casting. They wanted reliable professionals who could survive a grueling shoot without labor laws getting in the way. The Riddle High students looked like they'd already filed taxes, and nobody cared. Stockard Channing is the most famous example. Rizzo is supposed to be 17, but Channing was 33. You simply can't fake that world-weary confidence coming from an actual teenager. It was rougher for Jamie Donnelly, playing sweet, awkward Jan. Donnelly was going gray at 30, and her roots grew back so aggressively fast, the crew filled them in every morning with a black crayon to keep her looking like she belonged in homeroom. The smell of dancing under the lights. That older cast faced a massive physical test during the National Bandstand Dance Competition. The Huntington Park High School gym had absolutely zero air conditioning. Cram dozens of bodies into a tight space, add intense production lights, and dress everyone in wool suits, and you've got floor temperatures hitting a brutal 116 degrees. To make matters worse, there was an active slaughterhouse right nearby. The crew had to choose between keeping the windows shut and slowly roasting, or opening them and breathing in heavy meat-processing funk. This sequence took 5 exhausting days to complete. Michael Tucci ended up hospitalized for severe dehydration. The shine on everyone's skin as they tear up the floor is pure, desperate survival sweat. A bacterial soup drag race. That stifling gym wasn't even the most dangerous location they used. The drag race down the Los Angeles River looks incredible, but that concrete drainage channel collects literal runoff from half the city. By the time they filmed, it was a stagnant, warm, bacterial soup. Every time greased lightning sped past, contaminated water sprayed the cast and crew. Randall Kleiser caught a 101-degree fever from a cut on his foot. Remember that hospital trip I teased earlier? Annette Charles, playing Cha-Cha, checked herself out of the hospital mid-testing just to wave the starting flag. She leaned against cars in absolute agony, white-knuckled her way to get the shot, and rushed straight back for emergency ectopic pregnancy surgery that same night. A jukebox on fire. With actors fighting off infections and pushing through surgeries, the wardrobe department focused on turning the clothes into pop culture weapons. Originally, costume designer Albert Wolski created heavily understated, historically authentic outfits. Kleiser absolutely hated it, demanding the musical explode off the screen like a jukebox on fire. Wolski threw the school dress code out the window, going full kaleidoscope with bold colors and those unmistakable pink satin jackets for the pink ladies. The goal wasn't realism, it was pure visual impact. It was supposed to look like the version of the 50s you'd dream up after having too many root beer floats, cementing an instant, undeniable visual shorthand for rebellion, unbreakable sisterhood, and looking cooler than everyone else. Trapped in vintage fabric. While those pink jackets symbolized freedom, Sandy's legendary high-waisted black pants were a literal prison. Wolski tracked down a genuine vintage pair of body-hugging sharkskin pants. Because they were 20 years old, there were no backups, and the zipper was completely broken. Not wanting to risk damaging the delicate fabric by replacing the zipper, the costume department painstakingly sewed Olivia Newton-John into them every single morning. That meant no sitting comfortably between takes and extremely restricted drinking and eating to avoid bathroom breaks that required unpicking the stitches. It's a running theme for this cast, dealing with excruciating physical limitations to land an unforgettable musical number, just like an actor practically shoved into the shadows during a stolen song. The optical illusion at the diner. Sometimes the sets themselves had to be aggressively manipulated in post-production to hide a massive mistake. Look closely at the walls in the Frosty Palace diner scenes, and you'll spot weirdly blurry posters. That's frantic corporate damage control. Producer Alan Carr signed a lucrative promotional deal with Pepsi, but the set dressers accidentally plastered Coca-Cola signs everywhere. Reshooting was far too expensive, so they used clunky optical mats directly on the film negative to blur the logos out. Even funnier, as the watcher, look at the set dressing and waitstaff uniforms. The entire diner is still heavily saturated in unmistakable Coca-Cola red, making the blurred posters look completely out of place against a rival brand's incredibly obvious color palette, stealing the spotlight in the shadows. That red diner wasn't the only thing feeling the squeeze of corporate politics. The swaggering delivery of Greased Lightning feels completely inseparable from Danny Zuko, but it was never his song to begin with. In the original Broadway musical, the number belonged entirely to Kenickie. Jeff Conaway, who ironically played Danny on Broadway before stepping aside for Travolta, was ready for his spotlight. But Travolta, fresh off Saturday Night Fever, demanded the number. Conaway reluctantly gave in. Watch the visual framing during the sequence. The lighting deliberately isolates Travolta under the brightest, most angelic garage lights, while subtly pushing Conaway into the dark, shadowy background. A brilliant visual metaphor for the theft. Adding insult, Conaway was accidentally dropped during the choreo, sparking a lifelong back injury. Singing to nobody. Travolta wasn't the only one demanding a specific musical moment. Olivia Newton-John's contract stipulated she absolutely needed a standout solo, but the stage musical didn't have one written for her. Halfway through production, her producer finally delivered "Hopelessly Devoted to You." The problem? Principal photography had wrapped, and the cast had scattered. Olivia came back to an empty set to shoot the scene entirely by herself. That's exactly why Sandy is alone in the backyard. The visual evidence is right there. The lighting on Sandy is noticeably cooler and flatter than the warm, golden hour summer tones established in her previous outdoor sequences, visually giving away that this emotional core was a total post-production scramble that earned an Academy Award nomination. A haunting slumber party, casting the perfect singer, almost led to a wildly different beauty school dropout sequence. Frankie Avalon descending from the heavens is iconic, but the producers originally wanted Elvis Presley as the teen angel. Elvis Elvis turned the role down due to declining health, passing away on August 16, 1977. Director Randall Kleiser noted an incredibly eerie coincidence. The heartbreaking news of his death hit the set the exact same day they filmed the slumber party scene, where Rizzo sarcastically sings about keeping Elvis's pelvis far from her. The crew was entirely creeped out by the timing. Avalon stepped in to save the day, but you genuinely can't help wondering what that scene would feel like with the king himself walking down those stairs, making up the moves on the fly. The pressure of last-minute music changes hit its absolute peak during the massive carnival finale. Producer Alan Carr rented a real traveling carnival for the shoot. The cast had rehearsed "We Go Together" for weeks, but the producers axed the stage finale duet in favor of something with a poppier hook. The replacement track, "You're the One That I Want," arrived so uncomfortably late that choreographer Pat Birch had roughly 20 minutes to throw together the entire funhouse sequence. The actors heard the song for the very first time on set, meaning all that bouncing excitement is genuine adrenaline and panic. Meanwhile, Eddie Deason was strapped into a spinning ride for so many takes that he stumbled into a pasture and violently threw up. The box office juggernaut. Despite the chaos, the vomiting, and the rushed choreography, the end result absolutely shattered the industry. Made for just $6 million, nobody at Paramount expected what happened next. It wasn't just a movie, it was a cultural tidal wave that refused to slow down. It became the highest-grossing film of 1978, casually beating out blockbusters like Superman and Jaws 2. It completely shattered the Sound of Music's 13-year reign, claiming the throne as the highest-grossing live-action musical. Through the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, massive big-budget musicals swung for the fences, but none of them could knock Danny and Sandy off their domestic box office throne for nearly 40 years, until Disney released the live-action Beauty and the Beast in 2017. The gloriously weird liftoff. That massive historic success makes the film's final moments even more baffling. Most movie couples get a kiss at the end. Danny and Sandy get into a convertible and fly straight up into the clouds like it's a perfectly normal thing to do. Director Randall Kleiser's answer to this moment is basically a bewildered shrug. The flying car wasn't in the stage play, which ends normally at the Burger Palace. The internet being the internet, fans cooked up the dark "Sandy is dead" theory, claiming she drowned at the beach and the flying car is her ascending to heaven in a dying hallucination. Co-creator Jim Jacobs shut that down hard, saying whoever came up with it must have been on acid. The car flying isn't heaven. It's just a movie perfectly willing to ignore all laws of physics to make you feel something right before the credits roll. So, after surviving heat stroke, biohazard rivers, broken zippers, and stolen songs, which of these behind-the-scenes nightmares surprised you the most? Drop your thoughts down in the comments below. See you next time.